Okay, guys, it's a great day to be in church. I know you've heard it a couple of times. Happy Thanksgiving. This was a big weekend for me. I'm part of the coaching staff. Staff might be a little bit strong. Of the NFL flag football Calgary age 10 to 12 Chiefs team. And we haven't won the big one yet, but we won last night. And you know what? It would have been a rough Thanksgiving for me if we had lost. A lot of emotion goes into that. I said to Natasha last night before we went to sleep, Natasha's like, it's probably a really good thing that those guys won today. Hey, I'm like, yeah, I think it really is going to help us tomorrow at church. So just be thankful you're here on the flip side of a win. I don't know if my character would have been able to sustain a loss. If we've never met before, my name's Jonathan, and my wife Natasha and I are the lead pastors here, and we're glad you're in the building. And we're 11 years into this thing as a church, and so it's kind of fun. These long weekends now look a lot different than they used to. It used to be on a long weekend at EC, everybody that attended the church in the first couple of years, a lot of people were young students, and so on a long weekend, y'all would just like disappear to your mom's house for Thanksgiving dinner. But now you're married and you got kids, you're getting a little bit older, and so you might be here today, and the only reason you're here is because you got dragged by somebody because it's Thanksgiving, and you're visiting them, and they're like, well, if you're gonna be here and you're gonna come for turkey, you're gonna have to come to church with me. So if that's the reason you're here, I'm glad you're here. I like Thanksgiving this way a lot more than when everybody took off. And so whether you've had your turkey or are going to have turkey, or maybe you're here and you're repenting for the gluttony you expressed yesterday, whatever, we're just believing that God is speaking to our hearts as a community. We're in a series that we've called Living the Dream. I want to read from Genesis chapter 37, verse 5. Real simple, 5 words. It says, now Joseph had a dream. Now Joseph had a dream. This verse is our starting line for the conversations we've been having. And we're studying the life of a guy named Joseph. Joseph is significant because Joseph was a dreamer. And we have dreams. Not only do we have dreams, God wants us to have dreams. We are a room full of dreamers. I made the mistake, or maybe it wasn't a mistake last week. I said, hey, we should greet each other as like, hey, dreamer, there goes a dreamer, based on the text we read last Sunday. And then after service last week, I had so many people that were like, hey, dreamer, and it was a little bit awkward at the beginning. But I'm used to it now. I'm kind of settling in. So I think now that we've crossed that threshold of awkward, we just need to kind of keep going with it. But there's a difference between like a cultural dream, this like thought that we're chasing an ideal, and a God dream. When you're chasing some sort of ideal, what you're going to find is it's a moving target. And even if you get there, you're not really satisfied because there's always somebody that has more, and there's always somebody that has different. And so most people who would say, or if you would look and say, man, they are living the dream, if you ask them, it's probably a little different. Probably a different story. And so we get this from a lot of places. But I just want to encourage you today as we're discovering what it is to have a dream and live with a dream, which is a little bit different than living the dream, living with a dream. This is not about us looking at the world around us and expecting everybody to bow down and do whatever it takes to help our dreams come true. That's not the outlook. The idea that all of my dreams and hopes should be fulfilled is sort of like that's a Disney level Hollywood fantasy. It's just not real life. It's Cinderella. I think it was Cinderella who sang the, I'm trying to decide, do I sing it like me or do I sing it like Cinderella? That's what's happening in my mind right now. It's like, where do you go with it? But you know, like a dream is a wish your heart makes. That's me. That's not Cinderella. But you know the song, right? Like anybody? Has anybody seen Cinderella? You're looking at me like you're all boycotting Disney. Stop it. You still have Disney, so do we, okay? And she goes on, she sings the song, and then it's like, it's okay, a dream is a wish your heart makes. Something else. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. And it kind of gets to the end, and it's like, no matter how your heart is grieving, if you keep believing, the dream that you wish will come true. She's lying. Don't listen to her. She talks to rodents. She has a mouse as a tailor. Do not trust this woman. Okay, says that's not real life. That's not the way it works, which is why we're looking at the life of Joseph, someone who wasn't living the dream, but lived with a dream. Is different. Joseph is 17 years old. He has a dream. Then he tells his brothers he probably overshares a little bit. Should have kept it to himself. They take exception to his dream. They're also taking exception to the fact that he was his father's favorite, the chosen son. Like any good brothers, they beat him up, strip him of his clothes, and throw him in a pit and sell him to the first group that came along. If you think that your family is dysfunctional and you've got sibling issues and you're either lamenting the dinner you had yesterday or you're not looking forward to the dinner you're going to have this afternoon, if your siblings are not going to strip you and sell you, you're doing better than Joseph. This is his situation. Sell him. And what we've learned so far as we've begun to unpack what it is to live with a dream, we see that when it comes to a God dream, you got to hold them loosely, but trust God fully. So I understand that as I'm dreaming, there's always a little bit of me in the dream. I gotta be loose with the dream, but hold on to God, trust him completely. Because God dreams never happen right away, they never happen my way, and they're never about me. And so instead of chasing a dream or trying to live the dream, we're looking at Joseph. How do I live with a dream? What is that gonna do to my life? We grab his story in Genesis chapter 39. Verse 1, it says, "Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands." I just want to walk it back for a minute. I don't even have the verse for them to put up on the screen, but Psalm 126, we've read it in the last few weeks. That's where we actually got this idea, we are those who dream, because in that text it says we were like those who dreamed, and the people were coming back from captivity into Jerusalem. We were like those who dreamed, and it said that their mouths are filled with laughter and their tongues with songs of joy, and it was said among the nations. So people looked at this dreaming nation, and other nations said, wow, look at those Israelites. God has done something amazing for them. I just encourage you, when you're living with a dream, the byproduct should be that people look at you like Potiphar looked at Joseph and says, man, I can tell the Lord is with that guy. There's something different about him. Verse 4, so Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. And because of him, he had no concern about anything except for what he was going to order on the dishes. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Now we'll talk about that a little bit next week, because turns out Potiphar has a desperate housewife living in his place, and Joseph's looks got him into a little bit of trouble, but that's next week. I just want you to see what happens here. Joseph is sold by his brothers, starts in Potiphar's house as a slave, is seen by his master. Potiphar notices that there's something different on Joseph's life, finds success, and then ends up running the entire show. Like, it's an insane turn of events for our guy. Potiphar was the captain of the Egyptian guard. He would have been probably the second or third most powerful person in all of Egypt at this time. He is top dog over the Egyptian military and special forces. If Pharaoh needs to send an army, he comes to Potiphar and says, Potiphar, we need to go here. That's Potiphar. Joseph, a foreigner, a slave, a nobody with a dream, has somehow ascended in the ranks and is now the COO of Potiphar's operation. It's crazy, and many of you, we're not avoiding the ending of the story. We know that in the end, Joseph ends up the second most powerful person. He works for Pharaoh, and he administrates during a season of famine, making sure that not only his family is fed, but that the whole nation is fed, and the messianic line is preserved through Joseph. It's incredible to me that Joseph starts out a slave, and on this journey finds himself now working for one of the top people in the whole country, like as if God's hand is not on Joseph, moving and shifting and orchestrating the events of his life. The fact that the most stressful thing in Potiphar's day is lunch is a big deal. And it says not only was Joseph successful, but Potiphar was blessed for Joseph's sake, which is crazy. Like, it doesn't say Joseph was blessed. It says Potiphar, the slave owner, was blessed because Joseph was there. It's like, just think about it for a minute. Joseph's the guy with the dream. Joseph is the guy who's got the favor of his dad. Joseph is the guy who is the great-grandson of Abraham. He's the grandson of Isaac. He's the son of Jacob. He is in the line of the patriarchs. And it doesn't even say Joseph was blessed. It says that Potiphar, the guy who owned him, was blessed because Joseph was hanging out in his house. Potiphar does not know the Lord. Potiphar does not worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Potiphar has a fully different view on the world. Potiphar is from a completely different system. He kills people for a living. And yet the Bible says because Joseph was in his house, Potiphar was blessed. He's blessed. This is, if you are living with a God dream, I just want to we're going to slowly continue to up the standard of what it looks like, what our expectations should be if we're truly living with a God dream or if I'm living with my own dream. If you're living with a God dream, the people around you should be asking questions about the God in you. If you have a God dream, people around you are going to ask questions about the God in you. Joseph's presence was a benefit to his boss. The people around him saw the God in him and it blessed them. That's the standard. I've got a God dream. Okay, well, what do people around you think about that? Do they see you as selfish, self-serving, trying to get your own way, trying to make a way for yourself? Or do they look at you and be like, man, there's something different about that person. There's something on the inside of them. You know what? I feel better when I'm around them. I actually feel blessed when I'm around them. I feel encouraged when I'm around them. I feel uplifted when I'm around them. So, if that's the standard, I want to offer, offer. It makes it sound like I'm like, hey, I've got an offer, what's that you can't refuse, right? That's the line. Okay, we're talking about movies. There's something, this is interesting. Do you know that 70% of millennials, and listen, this is not a rag, okay? Most of our church are from the millennial. I wish I was a millennial. I'm just on the wrong side, just like couple years off. Just old. I read a stat that 70% of people from that generation look for a deal before they make a purchase. Now, what that doesn't say is that we got it from our parents who didn't buy anything without a coupon. Like, my dad will take back anything. He is fearless. That guy will walk into any store at any time with a half-eaten box of Cheerios and somehow get his money back. If you have a parent like that, you know what I'm talking about. There's just something about us that is wired to want to cheat the system. And a coupon feels like an honest way of cheating the system. Like, man, if I bring this in, I get 25% off. It's like stealing 25% from the store. And we get so excited. There's does anybody remember Game Genie? Really? Nobody? Wow. Crushed. Okay. This is Game Genie, all right? Way back in the day, like Nintendo. N64. Like these early, like the OG video game systems, there was this thing that you could buy. It was the Game Genie. And you'd put it into your system, then you'd put the game in the Game Genie, and the Game Genie would hack the system and give you all these benefits, okay? So you could Game Genie came with a book that had codes in it, and you would put your game in, put the Game Genie in. I'm doing it like this because I was putting it into my original Nintendo. You push it down, just trying to make that sucker work. And I'm getting it in, you get it, you push it down, you get it in, and then you put your code in, and you could unlock a whole world of powers that were not available to the average person. Do I want unlimited lives? Of course I do. And you could pick your feature. So the whole premise was hey, you can cheat, but it's kind of not really cheating because everybody, that doesn't really make it right if everybody's doing it. But you get the idea. It's you could just purchase it. It didn't feel like cheating because we were all cheating. My wife and her siblings, they saved up. She was telling me this story last night that when they were kids, they say early 90s, they pooled all their money together, all these little kids in Fort Mac. It's dark 17 hours a day. And they can't go outside. It's too cold. And so they went down to Videotronics. Was it Videotronics? They went to Videotronics, brought their $75, bought a Game Genie, and then just sat there and nerded out using the codes and beating all the games. And so this is kind of what I'm thinking today. I want to give you the cheat code, the Game Genie, if you will, for what it is to live with a dream so that people on the outside notice something different on the inside. There is a Game Genie. There is a cheat code. It's really, I think sometimes we get this idea it's so daunting and how could I ever make a difference in the world around me? And no, it's actually simple. You just need the cheat code. Once you get the cheat code, it's like superpowers come on you and you're just out there fireballing everybody and you never die. That's what we're getting at today. You ready? Turn to your neighbor, just go, just do that. Cheat codes. Nobody did that. That's the first time I got a 0 return rate on a turn to your neighbor. It's we'll try again later. Okay, Genesis 39, verse 1, cheat code. There are 5 components to this cheat code if you're taking notes. 5 components. Here we go, Genesis 39, 1. Now Joseph had been brought to Egypt. Joseph, when he arrived in Egypt, was a slave. He is nothing more to his master than a number. And in this time and context, Joseph would have been one of many slaves working at Potiphar's house. Almost to the point of being disposable, they would have a lot of slave activity. He would have been given very limited responsibility in his early days because, of course, when somebody just shows up, you don't really trust them with much. And so he would have had a lot of mundane tasks and mundane jobs to do. The majority of Joseph's life was completely outside of his control. Joseph did not get to decide where he sleeps. Joseph did not decide when he woke up. Joseph did not decide what was for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Joseph did not decide whether he ate breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or where he ate it. He didn't decide what he did all day. He was basically like a robot, a nameless, a faceless, just in a system doing whatever the master wanted. He's got no say. It's almost a mystery considering how Joseph, from a couple chapters earlier, running around in the bright robe that his dad gave him, bragging to his brother, seemingly having every advantage. Like I mentioned, the grandson of the patriarch Isaac and the great-grandson of Abraham, son of Jacob. How did this guy end up a slave in a foreign country? How did this guy, if his whole family up until this point has been marked by covenant promise and provision and protection from the Lord, how did this guy end up here? How did Joseph, the one with the dream, the one with the favor, it does not add up that Joseph ends up in Potiphar's house. And if I'm Joseph, and as I'm reading the Bible, Joseph is one of those characters, because most of the characters are so jacked up that it doesn't take long to see, oh yeah, that's what I would do too, right? There's a lot of that in the Bible. You start reading a story, you're like, oh, he freaked out. Oh, he's angry. Oh, he's prideful. You're like, yeah, me too. You see yourself in the story. Joseph is an interesting one because I keep waiting for Joseph to lose his cool. I keep waiting for Joseph to freak out on God at some point, and it never happens. But if I were Joseph, probably at the moment that my brothers attacked me and left me in a pit, I'm like, hey, take your dream back. Not interested. But if I didn't do it then, I'm surely doing it once I'm sold into slavery in a foreign country. Hey, God, this looks nothing like the dream. You missed it. Things are kind of screwed up here. This is not what I anticipated. This is not what I thought it would look like to be favored. This is certainly not what I thought it would look like to be carrying and living with a dream. God, how is it that I am here? And if we go back to the 5th word of the 39th chapter, it says, now Joseph had been brought. He'd been brought. When I read that, I start to just draw some natural conclusions on who brought him. Well, he was brought down to Potiphar's house because of his brothers. He was brought there because of, he told his dream to the wrong person. He's brought there by the Ishmaelites who sold him to Potiphar. He's just brought there. But then I stumbled on Psalm 105. Psalm 105 is this interesting little text. It's written by David about 750 years after the time of Joseph. And David was a shepherd. He was the king of Israel. He's living, as he writes this, he's living in the promised land that God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. David, 750 years after Joseph, is living there, okay? And he's writing a song. And one of David's greatest hits is Psalm 105. And in my Bible, the title says, Tell of All His Wondrous Works. You're not going to hear that title on any top 40, and maybe Pastor Sunil, we could do some revisions and offer a new title and just repackage the David collection. But in this song, Psalm 105, David is writing about all of the amazing and wonderful things God has done. And verse 16, which another just issue, he's got way too many verses in his songs. Nobody's going to stick with him through 16 verses. But he says this. He writes this in the song. Remember the title, Tell of All His Wondrous Works, all the good stuff. He says, well, he called down famine on the land and destroyed all their supplies of food. He sent a man before them, Joseph sold as a slave. Okay, David's greatest hits. These are the amazing things that God has done. He allowed a famine to wipe out all the food supply. Oh God, you are so amazing. And he sent a man, Joseph, sold as a slave. You want to know the first cheat code to living with a dream, the cheat code to having people on the outside look and be like, man, there's something different about that person? You're not a slave, you're sent. You're sent. No, wait, I thought it was his brothers or the Ishmaelites or misfortune or bad luck. No. David has hindsight. And so David can look from the future back on the story of Joseph and be like, oh no, Joe, that was God's plan all along. If God did not send Joseph into a pit and then into slavery in Potiphar's house in Egypt, then Joseph would not have been in Egypt when the famine came to preserve the Messianic line, and the Israelites would not have been in Egypt at the end of 400 years to be freed from slavery and take possession of the promised land. David has context. And so David's like, no, Joe is sent. So what looked like slavery and felt like slavery and smelt like slavery and seemed an awful lot like slavery on every possible indication was really Joseph on assignment. I thought he was a slave. No. He's sent. To be sent is to be deployed, dispatched, or propelled. God needed Joseph in Egypt, and he chose the pathway of Potiphar's house. God was working a plan that Joseph needed to trust, but that he could not see. which ought to be an encouragement to somebody today who feels like I'm in a bit of an Egypt. I'm not where I thought I'd be. I'm not where I think I should be. Our family's not where we want to be. My finances aren't where I thought they'd be. My relationship status isn't what I want it to be. Everybody's talking about Thanksgiving. I don't really feel like I got anything to be thankful for because this is not what I expected. Hey, Joe didn't know either. He didn't know how things were going to work out. He's in it. He's got no idea. He does not have hindsight. He's just got the moment he's in, but he was a dreamer. And when you're living with a dream, it'll keep you from playing the victim. I say playing the victim because there's a difference between playing the part of victim and being a victim. Right? If anybody could have been a victim, it's Joseph. Stripped, beaten, betrayed by his brothers, actually sold as a piece of property, completely devalued and ripped of his identity. If anybody could say, man, some people have done me wrong, it's Joseph. And I understand there are people in this room, and you legitimately have been the victim of a tragic situation, maybe of some abuse, maybe something incredibly awful happened to you. And so there are some who are victims, but there are many more in our current cultural context who they're actors. They just like to play the victim. They're the Cinderellas, like, my dream is not coming true yet. And you play the victim, and you want everybody to be sympathetic, and you want everybody to come and cry at your door because you're just upset and you just really want attention and you're a narcissist. Sorry, happy Thanksgiving. You try to blame your current situation on other people to abdicate responsibility for being where you are. So Joseph's like, I am not gonna be the victim. I'm not gonna play the victim because I'm living with a dream. Joseph's a dreamer. He does not have time to get jaded. He's got a dream. Joseph's living with a dream. He doesn't have time to get offended and waste days, weeks, months, years over having a terrible dad and lousy brothers. He doesn't have time for it. Joseph doesn't have time to think about quitting because Joseph is living with a dream, and a dream will protect you. And Joseph understands, I'm not a slave in Potiphar's house. I am a soldier deployed by God to have an impact in foreign territory. That's why I'm here. And listen, I'm not trying to say that all of the awful things that happened to Joseph were God's fault. What I am trying to say is that if you have a God dream, God can take the crazy things and turn them for your good. God is not the reason it happened to you. God is not the reason you're in difficulty. God is not the reason you're in a trial. God is not the reason you were hurt or overlooked or abused. But God can and will bring a reason out of everything. Remember the original audience. The original audience for the story of Joseph, Moses is telling it to 1 million or so Hebrew people who are just on their way out of slavery. And so as he's telling the story, this is not, that Joseph is not coming across as folklore or some sort of fictional character, but they're relating to him on a deeply personal level because they're like, wow, Joseph was mistreated and Joseph was enslaved, but he was sent with a purpose and God had a redemptive plan for his life. And so now them who are struggling to find their own identity are on the outside of captivity in the wilderness hearing the story. They're like, wow, we're like Joseph. We were mistreated and we were enslaved. Wow, we were entreated and enslaved a lot longer than Joseph was. So if Joseph was mistreated and enslaved and he had this great purpose, how big is the purpose of God on us who have spent 400 years toiling in slavery? Man, what a promise, what a plan. We've been sent. Dreamers, you're sent. We're not stuck. You're sent. You're not enslaved. You're sent. God hasn't forgotten about you and left you. No, you're sent. And Joseph is also foreshadowing Jesus because Joseph was sent. And Jesus says in John chapter 17, verse 18, as you, referring to the Father, sent me into the world. So Jesus is saying, hey, Joe's sent, I'm sent. Then he says, I've sent them, who's them? It's us, into the world. So Joseph was sent, Jesus was sent, and you and I have been sent. And if we could embrace the idea that where I am today is not slavery, it's not being stuck, it's not for no reason, but God has sent me here, I'm telling you, that perspective will change everything. We're really quick to assume that when the circumstances of life are undesirable and God is undetectable, that means the dream is dead and over. I'm stuck here. This is ridiculous. And listen, admittedly, there will be moments when life sucks. Okay, we know that. I'm not telling you something you don't know. You're like, yeah, that's me right now. That's today. I burnt my turkey. There's things. There'll be moments when like I think Joseph should have, but he didn't, when we're asking like, God, if you love me and have a plan for me, how the heck, I tried to have a dream, how am I here? What if our perspective was, man, he does love me. He does have a plan for me. He sent me here. Like what if the street you live on isn't because it's the best house at the best price at that particular moment, but it's because God was sending you because there's a neighbor that needs to look and be like, man, there's something different about that person. What if the job you're working isn't just the only job you were qualified for, but what if you, in fact, are on divine assignment and God said, man, I really need somebody in that company right now, brings you over, drops you in that job, and now you've got a divine assignment to let Jesus radiate through your life. What if we're not in our city by accident? When I first moved to Calgary, we sort of underestimated how spiritual it was. We gave ourselves a lot of credit for the decision to be here. So we were like, well, the market's favorable in Calgary. This is like 2012. There's a few things that we wanted 4 seasons, okay? And so fall is my favorite. I love it. I like when it's cool in the morning, kind of burns a little bit when you breathe in. Then you can wear a t-shirt in the afternoon. That's like Alberta fall, all like 7 days of it is the best season. But we just wanted to make sure we had 4 seasons. We were coming from Vancouver, and the only people that like Vancouver are the people that are still there. And the people that are still there, they'll defend it like, it's the best. Yeah, for like a week. Maybe 3 weeks, you get a little bit of sun, and then it rains for 11 months straight. What then? It's terrible. We just had this idea like, okay, well, we want to go somewhere where there's 4 seasons. Calgary has 4 seasons. The economy's strong, so that makes sense. And it just was like, it felt like it was logical. I just brought it before the Lord. I was like, God, I need to live somewhere that has, if I could at some point, Lord, be in a city that has all 4 major professional sports, I'd love that. But if I can't do that, just give me at least one. I need one, Lord. And so we're here. And if you had asked us for a few years, I would have said, yeah, 2012, we decided to move to Calgary. You know what I realize now? Me deciding with my wife to move to Calgary, I bet every time we told that story, God was like, oh, that's cute. God in his grace lets us think that some things are our idea, but in actuality, we didn't decide to move here. I believe we were deployed. I believe God was like, hey man, there's gonna be somebody at your superstore. There's gonna be a neighbor. There's gonna be, your kids need to get into school. Like we've had these amazing supernatural moments of impact and touch points. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, I didn't make this decision at all. God was working this out the whole time. What if we're not all like circumstantial Calgarians? Like, well, I am. I moved from Toronto because the market is crazy there, and I bought 7 houses in Calgary for the price of my bungalow in Toronto. Okay. Toronto. Now, what if it's not circumstance? What if you're not a Calgarian by chance, or an Airdrieite, or High Riverites, for sure, High Riverites. What do people from Chestermere call themselves? Chestermerians. What if all of that is not an accident? What if we've been sent and dispatched by our Heavenly Father on divine assignment for a supernatural purpose? Listen, the church only works when we all embody this idea that I've been sent. And history proves the best thing that ever happened to the world was the church being sent. Western civilization has flourished not because of great governance, but because of a great church and a great foundation. It was the church who saw themselves as being sent that led to major breakthroughs and equality and dealing with racism and slavery and education and medical care. Like, these are church's ideas. Our nation has benefited from a sent church. And the more the church retreats, the more the nation decays. We can watch. It's not hard to look as Western civilizations crumble as they reject godly values. Why? Because when we live sent, we are a blessing to people around us. There is a blessing. The difficulty you've walked through and the betrayal you've been dealt and the medical challenges you faced as a family and the strain and the grind and the hard work and the frustration, I'm telling you, God can use all of it for His glory. And we know that in all of these things, not just some, not just a few, but in all of these things, God works for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. We like to stop the verse that God works all these things for the good of those who love Him. But the truth is, it's not just about His love for you. You got to be living with His dream, and then He can turn things around in your life. I'm sent. It's a cheat code on living with a dream. You know, the second cheat code, the first one's always the longest, okay? This is how these things work. The second cheat code says in verse 2 that the Lord was with Joseph. You were not sent alone. He doesn't send us alone. The Lord was with Joseph. It sure didn't look like it. It didn't feel like it. We don't have any record of like a divine visitation where God shows up at Potiphar's house. He's like, Joe, it's going to be all right, man. I got a plan. Doesn't happen. Yet the facts are stated. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord is with him. God with us. God was with Joseph in rejection. God was with Joseph in slavery. God is the one that is with you in every season, every up, every down. He was with Joseph while he was parading around the house in his fancy coat, and He's with him here when he's a slave in Potiphar's home. He's with Joseph, and He's with you. You're sent, but He's with you. Isaiah 41 verse 10 says, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. The implications of God being with us, well, one, you don't have to be afraid. That's a great implication. You don't have to be dismayed. You don't have to be worried about the future and frazzled and stressed out. Why? Because God's with you right now. You don't have to worry about your weakness because God will strengthen you in your weakness because He's with you. And He will uphold you, which means you don't have to quit because God is with you right now. And when you feel like giving up, He will lift you up and uphold you and allow you to keep going. And if God is with me and God is for me, then there is nobody that can be against you. God is with you. You're sent, and you're not sent alone. And it says he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. God was using Joseph powerfully. Joseph was not a pastor. Joseph was not a prophet. Joseph was not a preacher. He's not a missionary. He's not like pulling together some of the slaves to lead a Bible study. There was no Bible, but you get the idea. He's a slave turned businessman. And I think it's important that we highlight that because there is a model here of God sending real people into real life to have real impact. And I read a quote this week. It disturbed me. It said that the great shortfall of Christianity in the 21st century is that Christians no longer see that God is still willing to greatly use men and women in every sphere of life. And so we've just kind of decided, well, if I can't do something at church, we sort of compartmentalize. Like there's the church me, and there's the work me, and there's the home me, but we don't expect our faith to spill over into the other areas. Can I encourage you, stay at home mom, you're sent. Like deployed to where you are. That park, that's your park, man. Defend it. You've been deployed to that park. That's your territory. You own it. Some other moms come in, they don't even know how encouraged they're gonna be because they rolled up on the park at the same time as you're at the park. And I know your kid's crazy. Let him swing off the thing. He'll be fine. Encourage the mom. Like you're deployed. Entrepreneurs, you're not just creative in business. You're sent. There are people in your sphere that some of us will never get to talk to, but you've been sent. Teachers, people in education, you are sent, and we desperately need you, probably now more than ever. If you're in medicine, you've been sent. If you're in law, you've been sent. If you're in politics, you've been sent. If you're in the trades, you've been sent. If you're in business, you've been sent. If you're in entertainment, you've been sent. If you're in sports, you've been sent. We are the sent ones. That's who we are as a church. And you are where you are by divine design so that people around you would be so blessed they'd see God in you. Cheat code. I'm sent. I'm not sent alone. Man, we got 3 more. Cheat code number 3, care. I know that sounds really basic. But there's a moment in Joseph where he was like, man, I am going to be the best slave. And he just went for it. If I'm sent here as a slave, I'm going to show all the other slaves, I'm going to outslave everybody. I'm going to be the best slave. And it says he was successful. He was successful as a slave. He didn't need his circumstance to change in order to find success and the hand of the Lord on him. He said, man, I can be successful for God right here. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he didn't know about the sermon. He didn't know what I was going to talk about, nothing like that. And I asked him how his week was, and he said, it's kind of interesting at my job right now because I'm probably not the most talented person at the job, but I keep getting put in positions where I'm overseeing other people. And I'm like, well, what do you think that is? He says, man, I think I just care. It's a cheat code, everybody. Just care. Just care. And now that he's overseeing other people's work, he's like, man, it's crazy to me how many people are slacking in their work and they complain and they got nothing good to say and it's because they just don't care. He's like, I can see it. If I can see it, my boss can see it. Just care. It's just so simple. Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Doesn't say like the church things that you do or the things that you enjoy doing or the things that are most rewarding. It says, whatever you do, like all of it, do it as unto the Lord. It's all encompassing. The way I serve my family is actually not really about my family. It's about me serving the Lord. And if I want to serve the Lord, I will serve my family well. The way you respond to your boss has nothing to do with your boss's attitude, has nothing to do with your boss's character, has nothing to do with your boss's belief system or value structure. You serve them and work for them as you are working for the Lord because Jesus is your boss. We work for Christ. In a couple of weeks, when I'm shoveling my sidewalk, you know it's coming. I don't shovel for my next door neighbor. Although I'm hoping that he'll see me and return the favor, I shovel for the Lord. I heard a story, somebody in our church, and it's amazing. They have a neighbor who lost multiple family members to cancer, so tragic, and is now going through cancer themselves. And just this weekend, that family has been building a deck for the neighbor because they're like, no, well, we're the neighbor. We're supposed to care for our neighbor. We're supposed to be involved and be Jesus to him. Come on, guys. It's an elite level life hack. It is the cheat code. You want people to see Christ in you? Just care. Care. Fourth cheat code. Have integrity. Proverbs 11:3 says the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Have integrity. Some of you are like, oh, that's so easy. I have integrity. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm not like stealing from my job or my neighbor. No, integrity and integrated come from the same word. And so to have integrity means that I've integrated, like, is your faith fully integrated into every part of your life? That's integrity. That's integrity. You cannot have a Sunday attitude and a night shift attitude. That's duplicity. That'll destroy you, and it'll destroy the witness to those around you. Do you have integrity? Do you have integrity? You can't have like an EC group attitude and I'm meeting with my boss attitude, and my boss is kind of an idiot. That's not integrity. You gotta bring your faith into every area of your life. If I'm gonna be encouraging there, then I need to be encouraging here. If I'm gonna be optimistic there, I wanna be optimistic and uplifting here. If you have integrity and you fully integrated your faith, then there are not things you laugh at the arena that you wouldn't laugh at in front of your kids. There are not things you look at with the guys that you would not look at with your wife. It's integrity. Gotta have integrity. Last Sunday, and you might even be here in the service today. If you are, I'm so glad you're here. But last Sunday, a bunch of the little guys, there's 5 guys from our church that are on this 10 to 12-year-old football team, and they came up to me after one of the services. They're like, Coach, one of the referees from football is here. And immediate, I'm like, do I have integrity? How have I responded to calls? And I'm kind of looking. I'm like, do I need to go to apologize for something? And then I'm like, no, I think most of the things I think during football, I don't say out loud, so I'm probably okay. And so, buddy, if you're here, you're doing a great job. Thank you for reffing. You're incredible. But it's just this, have I integrated my faith into every area of my life? Do not be destroyed by duplicity. Duplicity, it's hypocritical behavior. You know that most people who would say, I have an issue with the church, I have an issue with God, don't actually have an issue with the church because the church is an entity. It can't actually harm them. And they don't have an issue with God because he's full of grace and he's full of compassion and he's full of love and he's full of mercy. What they have an issue with is somebody who said, I'm a Christian but didn't act like it. Have integrity. Cheat code. Final cheat code. You want to live like an elite level, influential life. You want to live with the dream? Gratitude. It's a life hack. It's amazing what gratitude will do to your situation. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18 says, always be joyful. Never stop praying. Be thankful in all circumstances. For this is God's will for you who belong to Jesus Christ. Always be grateful. Not just on Thanksgiving. Always be grateful. Not just when it's going your way. Always be grateful. Not just when things are working out. Always be grateful. Anytime, anywhere, have a heart full of gratitude. G.K. Chesterton says this: when it comes to life, the critical thing is whether you take things for granted or take them with gratitude. And I would maintain that thanks are the highest form of thought and that gratitude is happiness doubled by wonder. Can you imagine happiness, but doubled by like, God, you've been so good. Doubled by, God, you've been so faithful. God, I don't deserve it, but here I am anyways. Oh God, I can breathe. God, you've been, oh wow. Gratitude. Would you stand with me from the front to the back? I want to pray over you. Gratitude will change your life. It's a cheat code. It unlocks the presence of God in your life. If he feels distant, if it feels like there's a disconnect, man, Psalm 100 verse 4 says that we enter his gates with thanksgiving. Like gratitude will just usher you into the presence of the Lord. Gratitude is where the blessing is unlocked. Jesus, before he multiplied the loaves and the fish, the Bible says that he broke it and he blessed it, and then God does a miracle. You want to see the blessing of God in your life? Start thanking him for what you have right now. Gratitude, most importantly, is faith expressed. Why? Because you can thank God for something that hasn't actually happened yet. Man, that's next level faith right there. God, I've been believing for a miracle, and I haven't seen the answer yet, but I'm going to thank you in faith. God, I wrote on the back of a picture and I hung it on the wall 4th year in a row. Haven't seen it yet, God, but I'm going to thank you in faith. Come on, that's gratitude at a different level. That's faith at a different level. We were singing earlier, come on my soul. Don't you get shy on me, man. There's just something about reminding yourself, God, I'm going to worship and I'm going to be thankful, and I want to be that type of person that even when I'm in Potiphar's house, other people are looking at me like, man, what is on him? What is on her? What separates them? What makes them different? If you've got something you're believing a pre-thank for, you've got a miracle in waiting, would you lift your hand with me from the front to the back? I just want to pray with you. God, I thank you right now for this radical faith that says, God, I'm going to thank you in advance for what I haven't seen. I'm going to thank you in advance because I know you're good, and I know there's a promise, and I know you're faithful, and I know you'll come through. God, we lift up an expression of our gratitude to you on this Thanksgiving Sunday. Come on, lift your voice.